just last week I made a video discussing why I was concerned about the upcoming portrayal of the Vizard in Core 4 of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc anime, despite the incredibly exciting cliffhanger to their story at the end of the last season. That cliffhanger, which featured all 8 of the holofied Shinigami preparing to fight Gerard Valkyrie, is an example of a near-total rewrite of a subplot in the anime, and one that will hopefully prove worthwhile. One of the key factors of that reveal that people picked up on is that the Vizard not only call themselves by that title, but they all don their holo masks for the very first time since the Arankar arc. Yes, the peculiar non-existence of holo masks pretty much across the board is a weird subject in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, despite the fact that several Vizard have returned to the ranks of the Gotei 13 and therefore are involved in the battle against the Vandenreich on the front lines from day one. Not a single one of them uses their holo mask in the war. And considering how badly the Vizard performed in the war, one can't help but think that maybe their holification could have helped. A unique advantage that only they possess, and one that, you would think, would be especially helpful against enemies who are deathly weak to Holo Reiatsu. A simple injection of a tiny amount of Holo Reiatsu into the captains who had lost their bankai was enough to cause the respective Sternritter's bodies to violently reject said stolen bankai. Imagine what a fully fledged holofied Shinigami could have potentially accomplished. And so part of what makes that Core 3 cliffhanger so intriguing is that it feels like a pretty explicit rejection of what the post-timeskip narrative of the manga tried to turn the Vizard into, or some of them at least, but we'll get into that. So, why didn't the Vizard use their holo masks in the Thousand Year Blood War arc? And what's changed between then and now? Why are they using them in the anime's final battle? This is a topic I've looked at in the past, but now we can tackle it with even more context, so let's take a look. Of course, if you enjoyed today's video and you want more content just like this, the best way to support the channel is my Patreon, the link to which you can find down in the description. It really does help out enormously. It helps to keep the lights on here on the channel, and again, I greatly appreciate it, especially in the run up to Core 4, where we are going to be very busy, and any amount of your support really does make the absolute world of difference, so thank you all so very much, and a big thanks to everyone who is supporting me over on Patreon, whose names are on the screen right now. Despite the fact that the most prominent Vizard of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, the trio of reinstated captains Shinji, Rose, and Kensei, didn't use their holo masks in the war against the Quincy, some of the Vizard did in fact use their masks in the manga's final arc, though the examples are few and far between, and crucially, mostly had little to no impact whatsoever, which is a crying shame when you look back at the Arankar arc and at least think about how much of an event it was to see a holo mask being used. Mashiro Kuna is actually the first Vizard to wield her mask in the final arc. In chapter 538, Kensei calls upon Mashiro to help Hisagi learn bankai, and in doing so she conjures her holo mask and proceeds to beat the vice captain up. Honestly, despite the fact that in the manga Mashiro would never reappear again after this moment, of the Vizard to use their masks in the manga version of the arc, she is arguably the most interesting of the bunch to do so, as it's revealed that she's also rejoined the Gotei 13, now as the 9th Division's Super Vice Captain, and therefore is the only Vizard to buck the trend that we saw. That those who rejoined the Gotei 13 don't use their holification whatsoever, even in scenarios where it would clearly be advantageous to do so. Why is this the case? Well, again, we'll get to that in a moment, but it is also interesting to note that chapter 538 is prior to the second invasion, and so at this point we had no idea that come the actual battles against the Sternritter, the Vizard weren't going to use their holification whatsoever. The only other example of the Vizard using their masks in the manga comes much later, in chapter 658, when Hiyori attacks Gerard Valkyrie. She conjures her mask in order to launch a triple Cero blast, and when Gerard emerges unscathed, 3 other Vizard try to jump the Sternritter in a surprise assault from behind. Love, Lisa, and Hachi all join the fight, with Love and Lisa also manifesting their holofication, though for whatever reason Hachi doesn't join them. Of course, as we've discussed many times in the past at this point, none of their attacks have any effect, and Gerard defeats them all in a single hit, Hollow Mask or otherwise. So again, holofication doesn't get a great showcase here in the final arc, despite the fact that it really should be very effective against Quincy's, but I guess here Gerard in particular is just much too strong. Although apparently not strong enough that Kenpachi can't just cut his arm clean off a few chapters later. So, why didn't certain Vizard use their hollow masks in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and why does it matter that Mashiro specifically did? It's exceptionally odd that the Vizard don't use an advantage that's unique to them, an advantage that actually could be extremely helpful in battle against the Sternritter in particular, as we saw when Kisuke Urahara helped retrieve the stolen bankai. That alone should have been enough to tell the Vizard they needed to employ their hollow powers if they didn't realise that before. It's been made even stranger in recent years thanks to comments made by Kubo himself over on his Club Outside Q&A platform, where he revealed that the Vizard could not only use their hollow masks in conjunction with bankai, something that by the way only Ichigo has ever been shown to do in the past, but that with enough training, it's even theoretically possible for the Vizard to achieve Resurrection in the same manner Tosen did, effectively turning them into extraordinarily powerful hybrids with access to immense hollow Reiatsu, which would have been an undeniable boon to their capabilities against enemies who couldn't even steal Resurrection in the first place due to it being highly poisonous to them. Kensei even theorizes in chapter 538 that his bankai might be stolen next, but even a surface level understanding of the relationship between Hollow and Quincy should have probably told him that that wasn't ever going to happen. Maybe it's on the 12th Division for not spreading the intel a little quicker. I guess it's also totally reasonable that the Vizard would never want to go so far as to learn Resurrection, certainly in the battle between Komamura and Tosen. Tosen having and using Resurrection is depicted as being a pretty bad thing, or at the very least a degradation of the character and his morals. And so, with all that said then, why didn't the Vizard who rejoined the Gotei 13 use their hollow masks in battle against the Sternritter? Truthfully, there are a couple of likely reasons. Firstly, have you seen how the Vizard actually performed in battle? Let's take Shinji. At least in the manga, he only really has 2 major opportunities for a fight, maybe 3 at a push. The first is against Bambietta, and he clearly underestimates her, taking her on with only Sakanade before being immediately blown up once she activates her Volston dish, and then again against Basby later on, where Shinji is instantly overwhelmed by Burner Finger 3, giving him virtually no chance to use his mask. And really no reason to either. Instead, he had to focus on rescuing both himself and Omaida in the moment, and supposedly used his Shikai to do so. Plus, at this point, he's also really quite injured, and I imagine using his hollow mask would have taxed him even further. Later, he's slapped out of existence by Gerard before he can even fight back. And so the same is mostly true in the anime of his performance. Although his battle against Bambietta is extended, it's once again pretty clear that Shinji is toying with her until it's too late. Meanwhile, well, his showdown with Basby is cut entirely. And while he gets the chance to take on Gerard in the anime further than he did in the manga, he is again still defeated pretty quickly before he and the other Vizard take the fight to the giant. Before we continue, one more shameless plug. Over 50% of you watching this video right now are not yet subscribed, so please do consider hitting that button down below to help us reach 300,000 subs. Maybe by the end of the year, your support would be greatly appreciated in doing so, in reaching that pretty big milestone for the channel. It would be awesome. It does help out the channel a lot, though it's not some superfluous thing. But for you, it's quick, it's free, and it's easy to do so, so I would greatly appreciate it. But again, as always, only do it if you like the content. Maybe you're new here, you just haven't hit that button yet. I would greatly appreciate it. The same is true of Rose and Kensei to some degree. Rose is seen fighting Nanana during the first invasion, and as far as we know, doesn't conjure his hollow mask. This one is a little weirder, I would argue, as Rose is fighting Nanana for quite a while, albeit off-screen, so it's totally possible that he did use it at some point. Meanwhile, when the two of them fight Mask to Masculine, again, it doesn't necessarily feel like they get much opportunity to use their holification. Kensei beats up Mask so badly initially that he again clearly underestimated his opponent before being savagely beaten himself. There's an argument to be made that Rose possibly should have used his hollow mask in conjunction with his bankai, given he saw what Mask was capable of, but once again it absolutely feels like Rose thought he had everything under control until all of a sudden he didn't. Now, Rose and Kensei as zombies is an interesting conundrum in my opinion. If the two of them weren't using their hollow masks before, out of some kind of ethical obligation, as we'll discuss in a moment, then they should have conjured them the moment they were zombified, as we saw Hitsugaya fighting with all his inhibitions completely stripped away once he became a zombie. His focus was solely on killing the enemy and using whatever means necessary. It's also important to remember that the Vizard can't actually use their hollow masks for that long. Most of them can reasonably only wield them for a few minutes, and so choosing when and where to use the masks is a much more calculated decision than you might expect. Admittedly, it doesn't help that all of them use their masks fairly liberally during the Fate Karakura Town arc, though. But then there is the ethical obligation argument, which is my favourite argument, which does make the most sense to me, even if it still doesn't wholly make sense. I mean, sure, from the outset it makes perfect sense. It is possible the Central 46 mandated that the only way they would allow these hollow-fired Shinigami to return to the position of captain was if they effectively relinquished their hollow powers as best they could, if, to the outside world, it appeared as though they didn't have them at all. It's also totally possible that Central 46 had nothing to do with it, and it was a request from Yamamoto himself instead, and out of their respect for him, they obliged. This idea that they were either asked or flat out instructed not to use them makes the most sense to me, and is my favourite theory, though I do wish it had been explicitly stated at some point, but alas. If this is the reason, one thing that I find so fascinating about it is the idea that Shinji, Rose, and Kensei apparently valued getting their positions back so much that they would be willing to pretend this side of them didn't exist, which not only feels like a pretty big deal for their characters, but it really conflicts with how some of their closest allies feel, like Hiyori for instance. But the reason I say this doesn't fully make sense is pretty simple, and actually feels like it could be addressed in some small way in the anime to come. And that's the fact that once the Vandenreich has literally rolled up, murdered the head captain, and now threatens to destroy the entire universe, well, I can't help but feel as if these kinds of ethical contracts should maybe take a hike. They should reasonably be thrown out the window, even if just for this specific conflict. I mean, seriously, Shinigami are being killed by the tens of thousands, and it looks like your side has a genuine chance of losing this war. Are you really going to be pulling your punches now of all times, especially when the enemy side is quite literally weak to your specific power, and crucially there are zero downsides to you using holification anymore? None. The Vizard all have it under control at this point, so conjuring your hollow mask is just a net positive overall. But of course, the Vizard who do actually use their hollow masks in the manga completely line up with this ethical argument. Hiyori, Love, and Lisa aren't officially a part of the Gotei 13 anymore, even if all of them wearing Shihakusho for the final battle is meant to be symbolic. That's ultimately all it is, a gesture. Mashiro, though, is more interesting and where we have to bend the rules a little bit. While Mashiro is a member of the Gotei 13 officially, she, Kensei, and Hisagi have quite clearly left the Seirei and headed into the far reaches of the Rukongai in order to train Hisagi. So I think it totally stands to reason that they're essentially just doing this sneakily. They're doing it on the sly. That they either think they can get away with her conjuring her mask all the way out there in the middle of nowhere with no one noticing, or they simply think it doesn't matter so long as no one sees them doing it. But if this ethical argument is the crux of why we don't see the Vizard using their hollow masks in the manga at such a crucial junction, then what's going on at the end of Core 3 and into Core 4? So, as of episode 40, all of the Vizard have gathered together and summoned their hollow masks, ready to fight Gerard. This is the first time Shinji, Rose, Kensei, and Hachi have used their masks since the Arrancar arc. But why now? What's changed? And what does it mean for their status within the Gotei 13? Well, I think there are a few things to take from this. Obviously, this is either spun off from or being added onto the moment from chapter 658 that shows Love, Lisa, and Hiyori using their masks, so it always stood to reason to some degree that they would probably use them here again anyway in the anime. Not only that, but I do think the urgency argument really starts to hold water here, more so than ever before. Yhwach has pretty much succeeded entirely at this point. He's killed the Soul King, transformed the Royal Palace, and is now preparing to collapse all three worlds into one, something that's even more pertinent here in the anime. The best time for the Vizard to use their hollow masks against the Quincy was during the second invasion. The second best time is right now. Not only that, but it's probably fairly clear that Gerard is massively powerful, so whatever boost they can get is going to be worth having. But finally, most interestingly and perhaps most importantly, it seems like this entire moment is about these characters making a pretty explicit statement. Sure, some of them are a part of the Gotei 13, and of course Shinji went out of his way to rescue Hinamori from Gerard. But we see that both Rose and Kensei have removed their captain's Hiyori, and then, in a pretty cool shot, Shinji tosses his aside also, before declaring that the Vizard will show Gerard a true miracle. The imagery here is pretty on the nose. For what is maybe going to be their final stand, the Vizard who joined the Gotei 13 have instead renounced the Gotei 13 at the 11th hour, and will fight alongside their friends as the Vizard once more. I don't believe there's any malice in their renouncing of the Gotei 13 either, by the way, nor do I think their renouncing is permanent. It's more a statement on remembering where they came from, what they truly are these days, and who their closest allies are. In chapter 423, Yamamoto berated Kyoraku, Byakuya, and Kenpachi for losing their captain Hiyori in the midst of battle. It's clear to Yamamoto, and by extension the entire organization, that the Captain Hiyori is hugely symbolic of the Gotei 13 as a military arm, and to throw it aside is no small act, worthy of reprimand by the head captain. Here, the Vizard are choosing a side. They're choosing a banner to fight under, and they've chosen the Vizard. In the same way they fought alongside the Gotei 13 in the Fate Karakura Town arc as a separate, albeit aligned faction, they are doing the same now. Interestingly, there's a bit of a contrast to be had here, and in some ways it could be seen as they're accepting both sides as who they truly are, because while Shinji, Rose, and Kensei remove their captains' Hioris and don their hollow masks, it is also true that the Vizard who didn't return to the Gotei 13 did accept the gesture, and did go into battle wearing the Shinigami Shihakusho. Why now? Well, like I said, it's probably down to the fact that they think this may very well be their last stand. The last stand of the entire world. And if they do go down, they're going to go down fighting together as the Vizard. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. I do hope you enjoyed it. I took something of value away from it as well. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think I'm right about why the Vizard haven't used their hollow masks in the 1000-year Blood War arc? And crucially, with the new context we have today, why they are choosing to use them as of the battle against Gerard? I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comments below. Do please let me know. I'd love reading your theories, and I'd love to read these ones as well. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Again, if you do enjoy content like this, Bleach videos like this every single week, consider hitting subscribe to stay up to date with the channel. Plus, it really does help me out as well, and I do greatly appreciate it on our journey to 300,000 subs. And also, if you want to support the channel that extra step further, the Patreon is there. It's the best, most secure, and consistent way to support me, and I do appreciate it so very much. So, if you haven't done already, do consider having a look. I do greatly appreciate it. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.